Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from the UPSC perspective. Today we have taken up important articles from the Hindu newspaper dated 31st March 2023. Topics which we are going to discuss are displayed on your screen. Let's begin the discussion. Now let's start our session with the first article which appeared on page number 18 in the Hindu newspaper. Context of this article is that recently, Union Finance Ministry has now publicly acknowledged that the multiple challenges it is facing in privatizing public sector enterprises, that is PSEs, and raising funds through minority stake sale. Now, everybody might have heard about the Air India sale to Tata. According to the government, the disinvestment drive has been stalled since Air India sale. Also, you should know the underlying theme which drives the process of disinvestment was reflected in our Prime Minister Narendra Modi word, that is, government has no business to be in business. So in this context, let's understand what is disinvestment. Then we'll see evolution of disinvestment in India. Then we'll talk about main objectives or benefits of disinvestment. Then later we'll discuss few important challenges of the disinvestment. And we'll end our discussion with a way ahead. Also, this theme is important. Disinvestment is important component of effects of liberalization on the economy, which is important theme under GS paper 3. Also, UPSC has been asking questions based on the same theme. Like this question, why is Government of India disinvesting its equity in the CPSEs? This question came in year 2011. Also in 2010, they talked about selling or offloading the shares of public sector undertakings. So with this we can see that this theme is quite important for your UPSC prelims as well as for your mains examination. Now let's start our session with the question, that is, what is disinvestment? Now disinvestment refers to the government sale or liquidation of assets, and that is usually central and state public sector enterprises, projects or other fixed assets. Now disinvestment may be used in specific situations to privatize assets. However, not every disinvestment results in privatization. Now let me tell you what is disinvestment with the help of very basic example. Let's say government owns a 100% stake in a company. For example, company that manufactures a product. Now the company is running at a loss and the government has to provide funds to keep it afloat. So in this scenario, the government might decide to reduce its ownership in the company by selling a part of its stake. For example, 30% to a private investor or the general public. So this process of reducing the government ownership in the company is called as disinvestment. So by reducing its stake in the company, the government aims to transfer the ownership and management responsibility to a private investors who might be better equipped to turn the company around. And additionally, the government hopes to generate funds through the sale of its stake, which can be used for other public welfare initiatives. So this way, disinvestment helps the government reduce its financial burden and promote private investment in the company. Now here, as I told you, that not every disinvestment results in privatization. So here, you must be aware about the different types of disinvestment. First is minority disinvestment. In this, government maintains control of the business by holding a majority stake that is typically greater than 51% in it. Second is majority disinvestment. In this, government hands over control to the acquiring entity, but it retains a stake. Next is complete privatization. In a complete privatization, the buyers receive full control of the business. That means 100% control of the company is passed to the buyer. So these are the three types of disinvestment. Now most of you are curious to know that when we started the process of disinvestment in India. So let's understand the evolution of disinvestment in India. It all started in year 1991 to 1992 when 31 selected PSUs were disinvested for rupees 3038 crore. Then later, the term disinvestment was used first time in Interim Budget 1991. Then later, Rangarajan Committee in 1993 emphasized the need for substantial disinvestment. And this led to a new department of disinvestment which was established in year 1999. And then expanded to become a full ministry in year 2001. So you can see the disinvestment program gained momentum. Then in 2004, the ministry was shut down and was merged in the finance ministry as an independent department. Later, Department of Disinvestment was renamed as Department of Investments and Public Asset Management, that is DPIM, in year 2016. Now DPIM acts as a nodal department for disinvestment. So this is all about evolution of disinvestment in India. Now further to understand it better, we should know that why we need disinvestment. So let's look into the main objectives or benefits of disinvestment in India. First in this is that it will help to reduce the fiscal burden on the exchequer and this eventually improve the public finances. Let's understand this point with the help of example. Now before selling Air India to Tata, Government of India used rupees 20 crore per day to keep the loss-making Air India flying. So by doing disinvestment, it helps to raise funds to cover specific expenses, such as covering a deficit in income from other regular sources. So how it will help? It will help to finance fiscal deficit and also to invest in the economy and development. Also, these resources can be redeployed in high priority social sector. Next benefit is that it will encourage private ownership and trading in the open market. So with this, what will happen? Government transfers the commercial risk to the private sector. Why? Because private ownership of assets often brings efficiency and increases the profitability. The best example of this is Hindustan Zinc. Hindustan Zinc has seen a 100-fold increase in its profits on the back of a 6-fold expansion in capacities since its takeover by Vedanta in year 2002. Next benefit is strong positive effect of labor productivity and overall efficiency of PSUs in India. Now post-privatization, the performance of the privatized entity improves significantly in terms of net worth, net profit, return on assets, return on equity, and gross revenue. Next benefit is maintaining and promoting competition in the market. Let's understand this with the help of example. In year 2001, government relieved 51% of Balco equity and control of management in favor of Sterlite Industries India Limited, that is parent company Vedanta Group. Now prior to this disinvestment, the company reported an annual turnover of rupees 898 crore in year 2000 with a profit of rupees 56 crores. So this is prior to disinvestment. But in fiscal year 2017 and 18, that is after disinvestment, its turnover is around 9,000 crore. Here you can see the difference. Post disinvestment and pre-disinvestment. So these are the main objectives or benefits of disinvestment in India. Now having seen the benefits, let's look into the challenges of disinvestment in India. First challenge is loss of regular payments to the government. Now as you know that profit-making PSUs pay dividend to the government at a regular interval. For example, in financial year 2021, state-owned companies and banks paid total dividends of nearly rupees 75,000 crore to shareholders including the government. So with this investment, government will lose this money. Next is it create private monopoly. Now disinvestment might create private monopoly in place of public monopoly. The best example is disinvestment of BSNL, that is Videsh Sanchar Nigam Limited, to Tata, or IPCL, that is Indian Petrochemicals Corporation Limited, to Reliance. So here you can see a shift from public monopoly to private monopoly. Next challenge is ambiguous division between strategic and non-strategic areas. Now several supporters contend that the government should continue to operate in strategic sector while disinvesting in non-strategic sector. However, the classification of strategic and non-strategic is not done properly. Example of this is strategic disinvestment in oil sector might threaten the energy security of India. Now let's come to the next challenge. Now many analysts have criticized the use of disinvestment funds to close the budget deficit as being a flawed model. Why?
because it is same as selling family silver to achieve immediate objectives. Next challenge is labor problems. Now, disinvestment can also result in labor problems, which is the next challenge. Now, how this is a challenge? Because employees of public sector companies may worry about losing their jobs or seeing their pay decrease once these companies are sold. Example of this is the recent disinvestment move of government to privatize HLL Life Care Limited received labor protest movements. Another challenge is lack of interest from buyers. Now, in some instances, the government may have trouble selling its holding in public sector companies, particularly if they are not doing well financially. For example, the sale of 52.8% stake in Bharat Petroleum, that is BPCL, had to be called off in the mid 2022 because almost all the bidders had withdrawn. So we can see that there is a lack of interest from buyers also. So these are the important challenges of disinvestment in India. Now, having seen the main benefits of disinvestment and challenges, let's see few futuristic solutions to overcome such challenges. The first in this is aggressive disinvestment. This should be taken to bring in higher profitability, promote efficiency, increase competitiveness, and to promote professionalism in management in the selected CPSEs. Next is strategic disinvestment needs to be focused on exit from non-strategic business. Why? Because this would unlock capital for use elsewhere, especially in public infrastructure like roads, power transmission lines, sewage system, irrigation system, railways and urban infrastructure, etc. So this will lead to the creation of fiscal space and improve the efficient allocation of public resources. And to maintain this, Government of India had introduced a new strategic disinvestment policy in year 2021 to maintain bare minimum presence in strategic sectors like atomic energy, defense, etc. and exit from non-strategic sector. Next is privatization or disinvestment program should aim at maximization of government's equity stake value. Now in this, the learning from the experience of Team Azak holding company in Singapore may be useful. How? In this, the government can transfer its stake in the listed CPSEs to a separate corporate entity. So this entity would be managed by an independent board and would be mandated to divest the government stake in these CPSEs over a period of time. So what is the benefit of this? That it will lend professionalism and autonomy to the disinvestment program. So these are the few solutions. Also, disinvestment should ideally be motivated by the government long-term strategy for how much of the economy it wants to privatize and the industries where it needs to maintain a presence rather than by the desire to increase revenue. Now our next discussion is based on this article which appeared on page number 10 in the Hindu newspaper. Context of this article is that a US company, OpenAI, has once again sent shockwaves around the world this time with GPT-4, its latest AI model. This large language model can produce and understand language that is creative and meaningful and will power an advanced version of the company's sensational chatbot, that is ChatGPT. Now, this theme is important because artificial intelligence, generative model advantages and concerns is important theme under GS paper 3. Also, this topic, that is GPT-4, is connected to the ethics paper, that is GS4, because this raises again the question of integrity of data, data privacy, transparency, and of course the bigger question of is science and technology is panacea for all the problems. Also, UPSC has been asking questions based on upcoming technologies, like this question based on artificial intelligence came in year 2020. So let's start our discussion. Now GPT-4 is a remarkable improvement over its predecessor, that is GPT 3.5, which first powered ChatGPT. So what GPT-4 can do? The first thing, it can take large prompts. While GPT 3.5 could not deal with large prompts, GPT-4 can take into context up to 25,000 words, an improvement of more than 8x. Next is that it is more creative. How? Its biggest innovation is that it can accept text, and image input simultaneously and consider both while drafting a reply. Example of this is if given an image of ingredients and asked the question, what can we make from these? GPT-4 gives a list of dish suggestions and recipes. Next is it performs well in test design for humans. For instance, in a simulated bar examination, it had the 90th percentile, whereas its predecessor, that is GPT 3.5, scored in the bottom 10%. GPT-4 also sailed through advanced courses like environmental science, history, biology, etc. However, GPT failed to do well in advanced English, language and literature, scoring 40% in both. Nevertheless, its performance in language comprehension surpasses other high-performing language models in English and 25 other languages, including Punjabi, Marathi, Bengali, etc. Next is, it can understand human emotions. GPT-4 model can purportedly understand human emotions such as humorous pictures. Next, OpenAI has released preliminary data to show that GPT-4 can do a lot of white-collar jobs, especially programming and writing jobs. So if we define intelligence, a very general mental capability that among other things involves the ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, and learn from experience. GPT-4 already succeed at 4 out of these 7 criteria. It is yet to master planning and learning. So these are the things which GPT-4 can do. Now, let's see few ethical questions revolve around GPT-4. First in this is threat to the examination system. ChatGPT generated text, infiltrated school essays, college assignments almost instantly after its release. So GPT proneness now threatens examination system. Why? Over dependence on technology, thus compromising upon innate human characteristic, and that is thinking. Next is integrity of data is not ensured. Why? Because its output may not always be factually correct. This is a trait OpenAI has called hallucination. Why? Because this depends upon the quality of input. And if that is incorrect, so would the output. Next is lack of transparency. So now by not being transparent, OpenAI may be able to avoid critical scrutiny of their model, which can make it difficult for researchers and experts to evaluate its accuracy and potential biases. This lack of transparency can also make it difficult for users of AI generated information to trust the output of the model, as they may not know how it arrived at its conclusion. Next is biases and stereotypes. OpenAI is currently using a separate model to moderate responses generated by their language model to address biases. However, this approach may have limitations in detecting biases that are not well understood or prevalent in non-Western cultures. An example of a bias that may be missed is caste-related biases in non-Western cultures. Next is possible propaganda and disinformation engine. How? Just asking GPT-4 to pretend to be anti-GPT causes it to ignore its moderation rules, as shown by its makers, thus jailbreaking it. As such, there is vast potential for GPT to be misused as propaganda and disinformation engine. So these are the few ethical questions which revolves around GPT-4. Now, let's see what are those suggestions which can overcome such dilemmas. The first in this is responsible AI development. Developers and researchers need to prioritize responsible AI by considering the potential social and ethical implications of their work. And how this can be done? This can be done by incorporating diverse perspectives in the development process, conducting rigorous testing, addressing potential biases in the training data. Next is transparency and explainability. It is important for AI model to be transparent and explainable to users and stakeholders. What does it mean? This means to provide clear documentation and explanations of how the model works and making it easier to interpret the output of the model. This will help to build trust in the technology and enable users to understand and address any negative impacts. Next is model auditing. What is this? It is important to regularly audit AI models to identify and address potential biases and negative impacts. As I told you, current model is quite ignorant of stereotypes those are prevalent in non-Western cultures, such as those rooted in caste. Next is data governance. To mitigate the negative impact of generative AIs, we need better data governance practices. This means establishing clear guidelines for how data is collected, stored, and used. So, how this will help? This will ensure that data is representative and unbiased. Next is by providing ethical guidelines. Guidelines for data privacy and security, transparency, explainability, fairness, and accountability. Next suggestion is by providing liability frameworks. Liability frameworks can help ensure that those responsible for developing and deploying generative AIs are held accountable for any negative impacts they cause. So, this includes establishing clear liability standards and implementing mechanisms for compensating those who are harmed by generative AIs. Next is by making proactive policy. OpenAI has released preliminary data to show that GPT-4 can do a lot of white collar work. This we have discussed under what GPT-4 can do, like programming, writing jobs, while leaving manufacturing or scientific jobs relatively untouched. So, wider use of language models will have further effects on economies. So, this requires proactive and futuristic policy making. Next is by promoting interdisciplinary research. Addressing the negative impact of generative AIs require interdisciplinary research that brings together experts in fields such as computer science, ethics, law, sociology. So, how this will help? This can identify and address potential negative impacts from a variety of perspectives and ensure that solutions are holistic and effective. Next is by promoting education and awareness. It is important to educate the public and raise awareness about the potential negative impacts of AI technologies. Why? Because this will empower individuals and communities to make informed decisions about its use. Last but not the least, users should be able to provide feedback on the output of the generative AIs and have control over how their data is used. So these are few way forwards which can help to subsidize concerns related to GPT-4. Now our next discussion is based on this article which appeared on page number 7. Context is that days after scrapping the 2B category for Muslims under the OBC quota and on the eve of the announcement of the assembly elections, Karnataka government notified the economically weaker sections, that is EWS category, to provide 10% reservation in education and employment. Now, Muslims have been included under this category as per the cabinet decision taken last week. The order issued on March 28, the day before the Model Code of Conduct came into force, stated that those castes that do not enjoy reservation status provided to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes and are not in the list of backward classes and communities transferred to EWS reservation from the backward classes will be eligible for 10% reservation. The 5 communities of Brahmins, Aryavasyas, Mudaliyas, Jains, Nagarats have been identified to benefit from the EWS reservation in Karnataka. Muslims are the new addition. Now, before delving much deeper into the concept of reservation, there's a small request. In order to understand the topic as controversial as reservation, we have to wear veil of ignorance. This is a thought experiment proposed by philosopher John Rawls to help individuals think about justice and fairness in society. It asks individuals to imagine that they are behind a veil of ignorance where they do not know their social status, class, race, gender, or other personal characteristics. In the case of reservation, the veil of ignorance could help individuals consider the issue from a neutral standpoint without being influenced by their own personal experiences or biases. For example, students from certain background will never support reservation. On the other side, students from certain background have a strong reason to support reservation. So by wearing veil of ignorance, individuals can think about the issue of reservation solely based on principles of justice and fairness rather than their own interests or identities. So let's start with the question that why do we need to cover the concept reservation? Now, the debate around reservation is centered on the practice of providing preferential treatment to individuals or groups who have historically faced social, economic, and educational disadvantages. For example, in many countries, including India, United States, etc., reservations are implemented in education, employment, and political representation. On the other hand, supporters of reservation argue that they are necessary to correct historical injustices and provide opportunities for marginalized communities. They argue that without affirmative action programs, members of disadvantaged groups would continue to be excluded from position of power and influence. On the other hand, opponents of reservation argue that they are discriminatory and violate the principle of meritocracy. They argue that reservation create a system where people are chosen based on their identity rather than their abilities, leading to inefficiencies and lowering the overall quality of institutions. Additionally, there are debates around the efficacy of reservation in achieving their intended goals. Some argue that while reservation may provide temporary relief, they do not address the root cause of social and economic inequality. So overall, the debate around reservation is complex and multifaceted, with both supporters and opponents presenting valid arguments. Apart from this, the syllabus of GS Paper 2 clearly expects us to have a clear understanding of this debate. So in this discussion, we will cover what is reservation, what are the constitutional provisions regarding reservation, then we'll see recent debates regarding reservation, then we'll talk about issues associated with reservation in India, and we'll end our discussion with a way forward. So let's start our discussion with a question: what is reservation? Reservation is a form of affirmative action whereby a percentage of seats are reserved in the government services and educational institutions for the socially and educationally backward communities and the scheduled caste and tribes who are inadequately represented in these services and institutions. Now let's see what are the constitutional provisions regarding reservation. First is Article 15 Clause 4, which allows state to make special provisions for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens or for the SCs and STs. This provision was extended to admission in educational institutions by 93rd Amendment Act 2006. But you should remember that this provision excludes minority educational institutions. Next is Article 16 Clause 4, which allows state to make provisions for the reservation of appointments or posts in favor of any backward class of citizens which in the opinion of state is not adequately represented in the services. Next is Article 16(4)(a), which allows state to make provisions for reservation in matter of promotion to SCs and STs employees. Next is Article 46 that allows state shall promote with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker section of the people, that is SCs and STs. Next is Article 243D. This provides reservation of seats for SCs and STs in every panchayat. Next is 243T, reservation in every municipality. Then Article 330, according to which seats shall be reserved in the Lok Sabha for the SCs and STs. And next is Article 332, which provides reservation of seats for the SCs and STs in legislative assemblies of the state. Now, as you know, reservation in India is a complex and controversial issue. While it was introduced as a measure to address historical and structural inequalities, it has also been criticized for creating new forms of inequality and perpetuating caste-based divisions. So let's see what are the recent debates regarding reservation. First in this is subcategorization of OBC. Now, idea is to create subcategories within the larger group of OBCs for the purpose of reservation. Currently, OBCs are granted 27% reservation in jobs and education under the central government. Now, this has been a legal debate for other reservation categories too. In September last year, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court reopened the debate on subcategorization of SCs and STs for reservation. Next is dominant caste demanding reservation. Marathas, Patels, Jats, Kapos and other are asking for reservation today, preferably through their recognition as other backward classes. This demand reflects the challenges they are facing on the job market. Next debate revolves around reservation to Muslims and Christians. Currently, the constitutional right to reservation in jobs and education as a member of the SC community is extended only to people from Hindu, Sikhs, or Buddhist faiths, in accordance with the Constitution Scheduled Caste Order 1950. Next is local reservation in private sector. Best example of this is Haryana State Employment of Local Candidates Act 2020 was passed reserving 75% of private sector jobs for people of the state. Now, having seen the debates regarding reservation, let's see what are the issues associated with reservation in India. The first issue is debate over meritocracy. One of the main arguments against reservation is that it goes against the principle of meritocracy, which is the idea that individuals should be rewarded based on their abilities and hard work rather than their social background. So critics argue that reservation policies favor candidates from certain communities or castes regardless of their abilities or qualifications, and therefore undermine the concept of meritocracy. Next issue is its limited impact. How, while reservation has been in place for several decades, it has not been able to fully address the issue of caste-based discrimination and inequality. Many argue that it has only benefited a small section of the population, leaving the majority of Dalits or other marginalized groups outside its purview. Next issue is backlash from dominant caste. Reservation has often been met with resistance from dominant castes who see it as a threat to their own interests and privileges. And this has led to tension and conflicts between different castes and groups, and in some cases, even violence. Another important issue is political manipulation, and this is quite important. Reservation policies have been used by political parties as a tool to gain votes and maintain power, and this has led to creation of new caste-based political alliances and the use of reservation quotas as a bargaining chip in electoral politics. Next issue is inadequate implementation. Despite the existence of reservation policies, many institutions and organizations continue to discriminate against marginalized groups. The implementation of reservation policies has been uneven and often marred by corruption and inefficiency, which has limited their impact. So these are the issues which are associated with reservation in India. Now, improving the reservation system in India requires a multi-pronged approach that addresses its various shortcomings. So here are some ways in which the reservation system in India could be improved. The first in this is to ensure effective implementation. Now, one of the biggest challenges with the reservation system in India is the lack of effective implementation. So there is a need to ensure that reservation policies are implemented in a transparent and efficient manner and that benefits reach the intended beneficiaries. Next suggestion is to expand the scope of reservation to include other marginalized groups such as economically weaker sections, transgender individuals, people with disabilities who face discrimination and exclusion. Next suggestion is to address the issue of creamy layer. Now, what is creamy layer? It refers to the affluent sections within reserved categories who benefit from reservation policies and may not necessarily require them. So there is a need to exclude the creamy layer from reservation benefits to ensure that the benefits reach the most disadvantaged sections. Next is to encourage merit-based affirmation action. Now, reservation policies could be supplemented by other measures that promote merit based affirmation actions. For example, institutions could adopt diversity targets, scholarships, mentorship programs to support underprivileged students. Next is to focus on quality education. Now, improving the quality of education in marginalized community is critical to reduce the dependence on reservation policies. So there should be investment in quality education infrastructure, teacher training, curriculum development could go a long way in promoting equality and social mobility. Next is to promote social awareness and dialogue. Creating a social awareness and dialogue around the issues of caste and reservation is important to promote greater understanding and acceptance of the need for affirmative action policies. And how this can be done? This can be done through public education, campaigns, media outreach, community engagement programs. So these are few suggestions which can be used to reform reservation system in India. Now overall reservation in India is a complex issue that needs to be approached with nuance and sensitivity. While it has helped to address some forms of inequality, it has also created new challenges that need to be addressed. That's all for today. Stay tuned for more such updates.